All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into a question that's absolutely fundamental for anyone studying constitutional law. Why do federal systems even exist? Using Rao and Singh's fantastic work on the political economy of federalism in India, we're going to really unpack the deep political and economic theories that explain how power gets divided and, why any of it actually matters, especially in a place as incredibly diverse as India.
So here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we're going to look at the whole idea of federalism through two totally different lenses. One is all about politics, the other is all about economics. Then we'll take a much deeper dive into each of those. And finally, we'll see how these big, grand ideas get, kind of messy in the real world, especially when you start talking about money and power.
Okay, part one. Before we get into any of the nitty-gritty, we have to start with the most basic question of all, right? Why even have a federal system in the first place? I mean, what problems are they actually trying to solve?
At its most basic, federalism is just about splitting up power. But what's so useful about the source material is that it frames this division as the result of two completely different sets of motivations. Think of it like two different origin stories for the same idea. The first story is political. It's about managing different identities and keeping everyone secure. The second story is economic. It's all about efficiency and the best way to deliver services to people. And these two lenses give us a really powerful way to analyze everything that follows.
All right, let's dive into that first lens, the political one. And from this point of view, federalism isn't some boring, dusty administrative chart. No way. This is about high-stakes deals, it's about identity, it's about power, and it's about the fundamental challenge of holding a massive, complex country together in one piece.
Now, this is a really important distinction, especially for understanding India. See, federations don't all form the same way. On one hand, you have coming-together federations. Think about the early United States. You had these independent colonies that basically said, hey, we'd be stronger and safer if we teamed up. But then you have holding-together federations. And this is India's story, 100%. Here you start with one huge, incredibly diverse state, and the central government purposefully gives away power to the regions. Why? To keep the whole thing from flying apart. It's not about creating a union, it's about preserving one.
So the main political argument here is that federalism brings the government closer to the people, but it's so much more than just creating more opportunities to vote. It's about building a constitutional structure that actually recognizes and protects different group identities. And in a nation like India, come on, with its incredible array of languages, religions, and cultures, you simply can't wish that diversity away. Federalism isn't a nice-to-have, it becomes the absolute essential toolkit for managing it all.
But then you get a guy like political scientist William Riker. And he comes along and says, hold on, forget all that high-minded talk about identity and freedom. For Riker, it was way more practical, maybe even a little cynical. He saw federalism as just a deal, a cold, hard constitutional bargain made by self-interested politicians to get what they want.
And Riker got really specific about what this bargain looks like. He said it only works if two key conditions are met. First, the politicians at the center have to want to expand their control, but they want to do it peacefully, maybe to face down some external threat. Second, the politicians in the smaller units have to be willing to give up a little bit of their independence in return for protection. For Riker, if you don't have those two hard-nosed, self-interested conditions on the table, a stable federation just isn't going to happen. Okay, so we've looked at the politics, the identity, the power plays. Now I want you to completely switch gears with me. We're going to put on our economist hats and look at federalism from a totally different angle. This one isn't about people and power. It's about market failures, public goods, and just making things run efficiently.
The entire economic case for government starts right here, with this concept of public goods. Basically, these are things that the free market is just terrible at providing. Why? Because you can't really charge for them or stop people from using them. The classic example is national defense. My safety doesn't reduce your safety, and you can't really exclude someone from being protected. That's a public good, and it's exactly why governments have to step in.
Okay, but that raises a huge question for anyone designing a constitution. If a big central government is good for the really big public goods, like defense, why shouldn't it just do everything? Why can't it also manage the local parks, the streetlights, and sanitation just as well? Why do we even need multiple levels of government?
Well, the answer is something economists call the decentralization theorem, and it boils down to two simple but really powerful ideas. The first is information. A local official in, say, Kerala is always going to know more about local needs than a bureaucrat sitting hundreds of miles away in Delhi. It's just common sense. The second is incentives. It's a heck of a lot easier for voters to hold their local leaders accountable for local problems because the lines of responsibility are just so much clearer.
So what this creates is a classic trade-off, a real balancing act.
On one hand, decentralization is great because it gives people power through voice, voting, and exit, literally moving to a place that's run better. But on the other hand, you absolutely need centralization to deal with problems that don't respect borders, what economists call spillovers. Think about a polluted river that flows through multiple states. One state can't fix that problem alone. You need a central authority to step in and coordinate.
And this whole idea is formalized in a theory called market-preserving federalism. It argues that for a federal system to actually be good for the economy, three things need to be true. First, you need a genuine common market, so people and goods can move around freely. Second, you need hard budget constraints, which is just a fancy way of saying states have to live within their means and can't expect constant bailouts. And third, you need real competition among the states to attract businesses and talent.
Okay, so we've got the political theory, we've got the economic theory. For our last section, let's bring this all down to earth. How does this stuff actually work in the real world? How can you even measure how federal a country is? And maybe most importantly, what are the practical problems that pop up, especially when money gets involved?
To figure out how centralized a federation really is, Riker had another brilliant idea. He said, forget the law books for a second. The true measure of power isn't just what the Constitution says. The real test is to look at the political parties. Is the same party that controls the central government also in control of the state governments? That tells you where the power truly lies.
He even developed a way to put a number on this, called the Index of Disharmony. It sounds complex, but the idea is pretty clever. Imagine the ruling party at the center is super powerful nationally, but it has almost no power in the individual states. Well, that's a big gap, a lot of disharmony. A high score on this index tells you that, in practice, the country is actually very decentralized, no matter what the official papers say.
Now, let's talk about one of the biggest, most persistent practical problems in any federation. It's what economists call vertical imbalance. And what it means is there's a fundamental built-in mismatch between the level of government that has all the money-raising power and the level that has all the spending duties.
This imbalance happens for a pretty simple reason. The central government is way better at collecting the big, mobile taxes, like income tax and corporate tax. If one state raised them too high, companies would just move. But at the same time, the states are given these huge, expensive responsibilities, like healthcare, education, and local infrastructure. So you see the problem. The states have massive spending duties, but limited taxing powers. And the result is a built-in dependency on money from the central government, which is a major point of friction in federal politics.
And this brings us to our final thought, a really big question for you to chew on. When you apply these two lenses we've been talking about, the political one and the economic one, what do you think is the real driving force behind Indian federalism? Is it first and foremost a political project designed for holding together this vast, diverse nation? Or is it an economic system designed to promote efficiency and competition? Is it about unity, or is it about the economy? Because how you answer that question really shapes every single debate about constitutional law in India today.